Hey guys, this is Jay Calder with Jay Unboxing here, going over the week's biggest fights involving the biggest fighters and names, and of course, handing out some fighter grades. And as always, I'm always curious to know what you guys think, of course, and you can leave your thoughts, your comments, all that sort of stuff down in the comments section below, whether you agree or disagree. Would love to hear it all. Well, there was no major fight this weekend. Still, we had a couple of title fights. A new champion regained his strap. And of course, we had some up and comers that looked to make their marks. We had the biggest card of the weekend taking place in New York's Madison Square Garden in the theater, which had Edgar Berlanga taking on Steve Rolls, which of course we will be getting into. We also had Sonny Edwards defending against Muhammad Wasim and Kenshiro Taraji regaining his strap in Japan. So, without much more rambling, let's get into these grades. Now, the first fighter we're going to get into here is Edgar Berlanga, who took on and defeated Steve Rolls via 10-round unanimous decision in the super middleweight division, and the grade that I'm going to be going with here is a C minus. Now, let's get the positives out of the way. He won, and he didn't get dropped or stunned or wobbled much, if any at all. That's about as good as it gets in this fight for me. Now, I did notice some fans were saying that he maybe could have lost the fight, but I think that's more a reaction to just how poor he looked more than the performance, and certainly how much maybe better Rolls did by just surviving than, again, his own performance as well. The truth of the matter is, I wouldn't go that far. I think Berlanga won the fight. It just wasn't a particularly impressive performance. He looked slow, he looked one dimensional, he just ran out of ideas pretty much from the opening bell. He was chasing as opposed to cutting off the ring and just didn't really have a lot of nuance with his work. Any fighter that seems to have maybe a jab that can, withstand his power and make him miss enough and has a little bit of their own pop is probably going to trouble Berlanga as his career progresses, and that's never a good thing. Of course, he still has heavy hands, but when he can't make them count, he can produce a real stinger of a fight, and that's what happened here. Again, Rolls was just a sophisticated enough fighter that he could survive at times and kind of make a little bit of a negative performance out of it, but Berlanga showed no ability to really adapt to that and press the issue. And then when he tried to, it came across as a little crude or a little bit one dimensional at times and just wasn't successful. And as a result of that, he gets the relatively low mark that he gets. Now, the second fighter we're going to be going with here is Sonny Edwards, who put in a good performance of his IBF lightweight title against Muhammad Wasim over 12 rounds, winning a unanimous decision. And the grade we're going to be going with here is a B plus. Now, it was a solid performance. He had decent movement with great shot selection. He's always kind of had that. The speed was there, the timing was there. For the most part, he was kind of out of harm's way. There was a couple of moments where Wasim had him up against the ropes or would pressure him a little bit more, but for the most part, he kind of dictated the action and the pace, and that's from an Edward perspective what you're looking for in his fights. He's trying to control things, whether it's the range, the distance, the pace. It usually goes at his speed, and for the most part, that's what this fight did as well. It's sort of what you've grown to expect from Edwards. What we need to see now from Edwards is whether or not he can do this against the bigger names, the other titleist in his division. Perhaps a fight against Julio Cesar Martinez would be the sort of fight where we can really see just how well he can do this. Because Martinez, make no mistake about it, whether or not he's, again, maybe a bit more crude or could be a little slower, whatever it might be, he has dynamite in those fists. And he's going to hit Edwards at some point because Edwards doesn't have enough power to get him out of there quickly. So it's a 12-round fight effectively, and Martinez has enough power that it can last throughout those 12 rounds and he can eventually land. And when he does, we want to see how Edwards responds to that. In any event, in terms of this fight, I didn't give him a much higher grade because, quite honestly, the level of opponent, and again, this is what we get from Edwards. A solid performance, and of course, would love to see how much better he can perform, if at all, against some of those more elite names in the division. But nonetheless, that's the mark he gets. Now, the third fighter we're going to go with here is Regis Progrey, who defeated Tyrone McKenna via 6-round technical knockout in the junior welterweight division, and the grade that I'm going to be going with here is a B+. Now, it was good to see Progrey. I mean, honestly, it just feels like he is not active enough. He's an exciting fighter. He has good fundamentals, decent boxer. He's not the fastest fighter, not the fastest footed fighter, but he's someone who has some power in his shots. He's a charismatic guy. You would just want to see him fight and in the ring more, and it just doesn't seem like it's happening. Of course, some of that can be contractual, promotional, injuries, what have you, but it's hopefully the start of something where we're going to see him in the ring significantly more, because when he's in the ring, he looked sharp, and that's pretty much the case in this fight as well. Yes, he was hit a few times, but McKenna is a long fighter, especially for 140 pounds. That's going to happen sometimes just based on things like range. For the most part, however, it really didn't seem to trouble Progrey. He was handling it pretty well. He had great reflexes. His pullback counters were working really well. And his shots over the top of those longer shots really were effective and kind of ultimately led to the downfall of McKenna in this fight. He looked solid. I said both, going forward and going backwards a little bit. Again, that's when he kind of got tagged a bit more. But for the most part, he was in control of that action. And again, for what it was, a sort of tune-up fight, a fight to kind of keep him busy and get him going into the next chapter of his career, I think it was a fairly solid performance, so he gets a fairly solid grade. Now, the fourth fighter we're going to go with here is Kenshiro Taraji, who defeated Masamichi Yabuki via three-round technical knockout, regaining his WBC junior flyweight title in the process that he had just lost to Yabuki in his previous encounter. And the grade that I'm going to be going with here is a flat A. And this is exactly what you need in a sort of bounce back performance for Taraji. He looked flat. He just didn't look himself in their previous encounter and really seemed out of it. And when he was finally stopped late in the fight, it just seemed like he was completely off. And you wondered whether it was maybe him just, meeting a style that did not perfectly suit him, or maybe he had faded. You just didn't know. But this sort of performance seems to suggest that it was just what fighters claim all their fights are, which is an off night. It just seemed like he really did have one, because in this fight he was 1,000 miles ahead pretty much from the opening bell. He was in total control. He looked like someone who really had that off night, really had to something to prove in this fight and push forward and did so. It was really hard to find anything to hold against him, especially because the fight was so quick and to the point. Obviously, it's going to be remain to be seen if he can continue this role going forward, but if he can, he looks to be a dangerous threat again in the division. It'll be interesting to see where he goes from here. Possibly a trilogy with Yabuki. I mean, I could see that happening. You never know, but in any event, solid performance, and again, really hard to knock him for just about anything. So that's the mark he gets. And the fifth fighter we're going to be looking at here is Alexis Rocha, who defeated Blair Cobbs via ninth round technical knockout in the welterweight division. The grade that I'm going to go with here is a B plus. And I love it. I got to say why I love it here for starters before I get into Rocha. I love it in part because of Blair Cobbs. He's a character, and that's what boxing needs. It draws attention. If he wins, he's the most hateable guy in the world, and some people are going to love it and find it funny. And so you're going to tune in either to see him continue it or to get his comeuppance like he did in this fight. If he loses, it's at least a more noticed fight, because you want to see him lose to someone like Rocha, who was just there to perform, and that's sort of what we got. So you have to give Cobbs credit for those kinds of things, because quite frankly, this fight was much more viewed than it would have been otherwise if he was just another relative no name that didn't come into this fight saying anything. You at least had a reason to watch this fight on a card that really didn't have as many eyeballs wanting to tune in as much as before, when you had the main event eventually have to get canceled that included Virgil Ortiz. So credit to him, credit for him wanting to continue to fight and for getting up for those pretty hard knockdowns. I will give Cobbs credit for that. But now on to Rocha. I love that he came to fight. He's an exciting fighter, and he showed a sort of well-rounded game. He was hit a few times, of course. Cobbs has some pretty fast hands, but he definitely showed up in that way, and I like that. And he was very methodical in his approach. He had really nice, solid straight shots and could throw within those kind of flurries of Cobbs, which I thought was good as well. He didn't, his temperament was good. He didn't get overwhelmed if he was losing a round or losing a moment in the round. He just continued to press the action, was cutting off the ring pretty well at times, and I think his overall performance kind of showed the sort of quality that he has. Again, who's to know and who's to say just how well he can go and how far he can go in this sport, but it was a solid performance, all things considered. And yes, again, as I mentioned, he was hit, but determined, landed, and most impressively to me, when the finish did come, especially in the 8th to the ninth round, he was very methodical in his approach, very patient, didn't get overzealous, was still trying to go to the body to set up that left hand, and ultimately did, which earned him the stoppage, and a warranted one at that. So it was a solid performance, and again, a solid grade results from it. And I will say honorable mention here goes to David Avanesian, who defeated Oskari Metz in a one-round technical knockout, defending his European welterweight title in the process, and the grade that I'm going to go with here is an A. Again, granted, Metz was overmatched and dropped the moment he was hit clean, but Avanesian made the fight look like what it was, a quick stop to more important fights. That's what this fight was. That's what he made it look like. It was quick, powerful and to the point. It was a solid performance again for what it was. That's why I'd give him such a mark. And again, it'd be interesting to see him finally step into that more world level territory, whether it's against a Conor Benn or whether it's against an Ennis or an Ortiz that we've mentioned. These kind of fighters, it'd be nice to see him tested against them because, quite frankly, at European level, nobody is messing with this dude. So he certainly needs to be tested. In any event, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts again, all your sort of grades, where you agree with me, disagree with me. We'd love to hear you on that. Do you think Berlanga actually lost this fight like some people do? We'd love to hear that as well. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. And you can email me at junboxing@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, and more. Of course, be sure to check out my predictions coming up this week. Would have had them this week, of course, but later this next week I will have some because hopefully fights won't get canceled, and I would love to you guys check those out, of course, as well. And as always, until next time.